The attacks on Marthe Robin, when a saint was targeted, a paralyzed mystic who lived without food for 50 years, became the target of violent demonic assaults witnessed by Vatican investigators. Long after midnight in the farmhouse at Châteauneuf-de-Galora, something moves in the darkness of the small bedroom. The woman lying motionless in the narrow bed has not walked in years. Her limbs are frozen by paralysis. Yet now her body strains against itself with impossible force. Her voice, normally gentle, erupts in words that make the priest at her bedside recoil. This is not illness, this is invasion, and it happens every week. Not all demonic attacks target the weak or the fallen. Some of the most dramatic and well-documented cases in church history involve individuals of unusual holiness, as though the demonic reserves particular intensity for those closest to God. The case of Marthe Robin, a French mystic who spent over 50 years bedridden and paralyzed, represents one of the strangest and most scrutinized investigations in 20th century Catholicism. Robin claims to live without food or water for decades, sustained only by the Eucharist. She bears the stigmata, and she is subjected repeatedly and violently to what she and her confessor describe as direct demonic assault. Her case remains under official Vatican investigation for beatification, and the documentation surrounding her experiences forms one of the most extraordinary collections in modern church archives. The farmhouse where Marthe Robin lives sits in the Drôme region of southeastern France, a landscape of rolling hills and quiet villages far from the ecclesiastical centers of Rome or Paris. Robin is born here in 1902, the sixth of 10 children in a farming family. Her early life follows the rhythms of rural Catholic France, unremarkable except for her noted piety. Then in her early 20s, illness strikes. What begins as weakness progresses rapidly to near total paralysis. By 1928, Marthe Robin is bedridden. She will never rise from that bed again. She will remain in that same small room for the next 53 years. What transforms a medical tragedy into a case of international theological significance begins in 1930. Robin stops eating completely. She takes no food. She drinks no water. Her family and the local priest watch in confusion, then alarm, then astonishment as days become weeks, weeks become months, and the paralyzed woman does not starve. She receives Holy Communion each week, the consecrated host placed on her tongue by the visiting priest. This, she claims, is her only sustenance. Her survival becomes impossible to explain through conventional medicine. Word spreads. Physicians arrive to investigate. What they document over the following years contradicts everything medical science understands about human metabolism. Doctor after doctor examines Robin. Some conduct extended observations, staying in the home for days to ensure no deception occurs. The consensus among these medical professionals is consistent and disturbing. Marthe Robin appears to be surviving without nutritional intake. No adequate physiological explanation presents itself. The medical documentation of this phenomenon will continue for decades, adding layer upon layer of credible testimony to what should be impossible. But the lack of food is not the strangest element of Robin's condition. Beginning in the early 1930s, she starts experiencing what she describes as a weekly reliving of Christ's Passion. Every Thursday night, as the calendar approaches Friday, Robin enters a state of mystical suffering. Witnesses describe her body rigid with pain, her face contorted, her hands and feet developing visible wounds that bleed through the bandages her family carefully applies. These stigmatic marks appear with weekly regularity. They bleed, they cause evident suffering, and then, over the following days, they heal without scarring, only to reappear the following Thursday night. It is during these passion episodes that the attacks begin. Father Georges Finot, who becomes Robin's confessor and spiritual director in 1936, is present for many of them. His documentation is precise and deeply unsettling. During the worst episodes, the woman who spends her days in serene prayer and spiritual counsel undergoes a transformation that witnesses find horrifying. Her paralyzed body strains with strength that should not be possible given her atrophied muscles. Her gentle voice changes, becoming harsh, guttural, unrecognizable. Words emerge from her mouth that contradict everything about her character, blasphemies that shock the priests and family members present. Father Finett documents these episodes with the careful attention of a trained observer who understands the gravity of what he witnesses. He notes the timing, always during the Passion reenactments. He records the physical manifestations, the impossible strength, the voice alterations. He preserves Robin's own testimony from afterward, when she describes with distress the sensation of an alien presence pressing against her consciousness, something filled with hatred specifically directed at her faith. The priest's conclusion, shared by other clergy who witnessed similar episodes over the years, is that Robin is experiencing direct demonic assault. The theological framework that makes sense of this situation is ancient, though rarely witnessed so dramatically in modern times. Catholic teaching acknowledges that God sometimes permits demonic attack on souls of particular holiness, not as punishment, but as a form of spiritual purification and testing. The closer a soul draws to God, this teaching suggests, the more intense the opposition it may face from forces that hate God and everything aligned with Him. Robin's case appears to illustrate this principle with unusual clarity. The attacks intensify during her moments of deepest mystical union, the weekly passion experiences, as though something is attempting to disrupt or corrupt her participation in Christ's suffering. Multiple bishops visit the farmhouse at Schatenhof over the years. The case attracts serious ecclesiastical attention precisely because it presents multiple supernatural claims simultaneously, each requiring investigation. The survival without food, the stigmata, the demonic attacks, the reported mystical experiences, and beneath all of it, the question of whether Marthe Robin is truly what she appears to be, a soul of extraordinary holiness, or whether some other explanation, medical or psychological, can account for the phenomena. The Church's investigation is methodical. Physicians continue their observations. Theologians examine Robin's spiritual writings and the testimony of those who seek her counsel, for despite her paralysis and suffering, Robin becomes known as a woman of profound spiritual wisdom. Visitors come from across France and beyond to sit beside her bed and receive guidance. Many report that she speaks to their specific struggles without being told about them, demonstrating knowledge she should not possess. The documentation of these encounters adds another layer to the growing file on Marthe Robin. What distinguishes Robin's case from typical possession scenarios is the absence of a single dramatic exorcism that resolves the situation. The attacks continue intermittently for decades. Father Finett and other spiritual directors understand this not as a failure of deliverance, but as a permitted spiritual trial that serves purposes beyond human understanding. Robin herself, according to Father Finett's careful records, becomes increasingly unafraid of the attacks as years pass. She treats them as unwanted but familiar intrusions that will pass as surely as they come. Her response to the demonic assaults becomes one of patient endurance rather than terror. The medical impossibility of her survival continues to baffle physicians into the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, and beyond. 50 years without food, 50 years bedridden, the stigmata appearing and healing with weekly regularity, the demonic episodes witnessed by credible observers, including multiple priests and church officials. The accumulation of documentation becomes overwhelming. Whatever is happening in that small room in Schatenhof cannot be easily dismissed or explained away. In her later years, the attacks diminish in frequency and intensity. Robin remains paralyzed, remains sustained only by weekly communion according to all observations, but the violent demonic episodes become less common. Those who visit her in these final years describe a woman of extraordinary peace despite her physical suffering. She continues offering spiritual counsel. She continues bearing the stigmata, she continues surviving in a manner that defies medical explanation. Marthe Robin passes away on February 6, 1981, at the age of 78. She has spent 53 years in the same bed, in the same small room, paralyzed and supposedly without food. The cause for her beatification opens almost immediately. The Vatican's investigation requires systematic examination of all claimed supernatural phenomena associated with a candidate for sainthood. This means the full documentation of Robin's case, including the extensive records of demonic attacks, becomes part of official church investigation at the highest levels. The process of examining Robin's life and the phenomena surrounding it continues for decades after her passing. Investigators review the medical documentation of her survival without nutrition. They examine the testimony of witnesses to the stigmata. They analyze the accounts of demonic attacks provided by Father Finett and other clergy. They study the reports of visitors who claim to receive supernatural knowledge or healing through Robin's intercession. The investigation is thorough, skeptical, and ongoing. What makes the Robin case significant in the documentation of demonic phenomena is its unique position at the intersection of multiple forms of supernatural claim, all occurring in a modern, relatively well-documented context. This is not a medieval account preserved only in questionable historical texts. This is a 20th century case with medical records, multiple credible witnesses, and extensive documentation by educated clergy. The physicians who examined Robin were trained professionals. The priests who witnessed the attacks were theologically educated men aware of the need for careful discernment between spiritual, medical, and psychological phenomena. The theological question at the heart of Robin's case remains profound. If proximity to God intensifies rather than protects against demonic attack, what does this suggest about the nature of spiritual warfare? The documentation from Credentialed suggests that the demonic focuses particular attention on souls that threaten it most through their holiness. Robin, paralyzed and helpless in physical terms, represents a spiritual threat through her prayer, her suffering united to Christ's passion, and her influence on the thousands who sought her guidance. The attacks she endures might be understood as the response of forces that recognize and hate that threat. The farmhouse, where Marthe Robin spent her adult life, remains a pilgrimage site. The room where she lay for 53 years is preserved. Visitors come seeking connection to a woman many already venerate as a saint, though official canonization has not yet occurred. The investigation continues. The documentation grows as more witnesses come forward, more medical records are reviewed, more theological analysis is applied to the extraordinary phenomena reported in that small room. The case of Marthe Robin stands as one of the most comprehensively documented examples of sustained demonic attack on an individual of reported holiness in modern church history. The attacks she endured were not isolated incidents, but a recurring pattern witnessed by multiple credible observers over decades. The medical impossibility of her survival adds a layer of mystery that deepens rather than explains the spiritual dimension of her experience. And the Vatican's ongoing investigation acknowledges that something extraordinary occurred in Credentialed, something that defies easy categorization and demands serious theological attention. Whether Marthe Robin is eventually beatified and canonized, her case remains a crucial document in understanding how the Church investigates claims of both mystical grace and demonic opposition in the modern era. The testimony is extensive, the witnesses are credible, the phenomena reported are consistent across decades of observation, and the questions raised by her experience continue challenging the boundaries between medical science, psychological understanding, and theological interpretation of inexplicable events. If you found this case compelling, subscribe to Vanishing Roads for more documented paranormal investigations from around the world. This story was created with AI assistance based on documented case files. All events reference real investigations and reported incidents.